Welcome to Culture, Worldview, and Origins. We're Tim and Holly Nyquist. This series is specifically touching critical thinking, skills in science, and this is chapter number 3, Worldview, Philosophy, and it's the first video. I have a quote here, is that this is a class on critical thinking, and there's other classes offered for critical thinking, and this one is offered by Yale School of Medicine, one of their professors, and his title of his course is Deceptive Mind, a scientific guide to critical thinking skills. The deceptive mind, your deceptive mind. That's an interesting title, Your Deceptive Mind, a scientific guide to critical thinking skills. And he says, knowing how to separate science, the foundation of critical thought, from pseudoscience is of the utmost importance to any well-rounded critical thinker. Okay, so as a critical thinker, what we're called to do is to separate pseudoscience from science, from real science. And that's what this course is about applying critical thinking to science. But what we're analyzing is what is critical thinking, and then we're going to analyze what do you mean by science? He continues with this quote for his class. Here, you'll investigate common examples of pseudoscience that surround us every day, from the denial of established evidence to the belief in grand conspiracies. I started this course and my thinking on a quote by Nietzsche. It says that there are not any facts, only interpretations. And that kind of goes in with what he's saying here, is that pseudoscience that surround us every day, from the denial of established evidence. Okay, what is evidence? And evidence is our facts that have been interpreted. And so Nietzsche would say, well, those are interpreted, and that's how we got into Stephen Jay Gould's quote of theory, habit, prejudice, and culture, and how that influences really everybody's ability to look at something neutrally, without a bias. In that Stephen Jay Gould, the quote that we've been using through this series, he says we can't, because we're all different and we all come from different areas. There's another quote that I'd like to look at for this series. It's by Richard Dawkins in The Blind Watchmaker. He says, I want to persuade the reader not just that the Darwinian worldview happens to be true, but that it is the only known theory that could, in principle, solve the mystery of our existence. This was an interesting quote for me from a biologist. One, he's talking about worldview, and he's talking about a Darwinian worldview. And again, I tried to research that. What did he mean by a Darwinian worldview? What is a Darwinian worldview? And I really didn't find any solid evidence of that was showing exactly what is a Darwinian worldview. But what caught my attention is that I want to persuade the reader not just that the Darwinian worldview happens to be true, but that it is the only known theory that could, in principle, solve the mystery of our existence. From my reading of it, it seems like he's got two parallel phrases going, and in the first phrase is worldview, Darwinian worldview, and then he switches to theory, that it is the only known theory. Now, in my younger days of just going through science, through high school and on, is that we came across a lot of theories, and oftentimes a scientist would say, well, that's just a theory. And it's kind of like, well, yes, I guess so. And what he meant by that, or what I understood it to mean, was that it was not a fact. It wasn't elevated enough to be proven as a fact. It was only a theory. But in this sense, that's the words being used in that is being used in parallel to worldview. And so that kind of threw me off a little bit, so I had to do a little bit of research. What does he mean by that? So what we have here is worldview equals theory, and we got the glasses, we got the world, and we're viewing it. And we come up with our interpretation of the world, and somewhere in there is worldview. That's the glasses, the person viewing the world. But somehow, what does worldview and theory have to do with each other? What does theory then mean? Well, theory comes from the Greek term theorein, and theorein has to do with to consider, to speculate, to look at. So the Greek word theorein, which we get our word theory from, is a word that has to do with speculation, to speculate, to look at, and it has to do with viewing. So that's kind of an interesting connection with worldview, obviously, because worldview, right in its name, is viewing the world, and theory is a way to look at things, to speculate. Now, breaking down the word theorein, the Greek version of it, thea, it comes from the word thea, the root word thea, which is a view, and oran, which is to see. So it's with a view to see. So that it has to do with observation, has to do with somebody well, that's what our word, I was going to say spectator, but theoros is where we get our word spectator. And that's what theoros means in Greek, is a spectator. So the whole kind of meaning of the word theory has to do with a spectator that's observing with spectacles, with a point of view to be able to see something. So now I'm kind of understanding how theory could relate to worldview, in that its theory is a way of looking at the world. It's observing the world as a spectator with spectacles, in that I am viewing the world through my theory. So that would mean that Richard Dawkins, that was challenging his readers to not only accept the Darwinian worldview, and that would be what we're going into in this chapter. Well, then that is an important component. What is a worldview? And then theory as to it is the only known theory that could solve the mystery of our existence. So somehow that worldview gives the parameters of establishing that as a theory, and as it being the only one that can solve the mystery of our existence. Again, I just want to read it in line again, and just you're thinking about worldview, and you're thinking about theory and how they fit together. I want to persuade the reader not just that the Darwinian worldview happens to be true, but that it is the only known theory that could, in principle, solve the mystery of our existence. The Darwinian worldview that happens to be true. I don't know what the criteria for truth is. I haven't been able to find what the Darwinian worldview is exactly. But it is claiming, Dawkins is claiming that it as truth. Coming back to the initial quote that this whole series has been based on, with the glasses looking at the world, and the glasses is the person or the spectator observing the world, and what we're observing is the same world, but somehow through our lenses we are coming up with a very personal and particular interpretation of that world. And that is what this series is about. And this chapter is on worldview and philosophy. But this is based on Stephen Jay Gould, where he says, first, facts do not come to us as objective items seen in the same unambiguous way by all reasonable people. Theory, habit, prejudice, and culture all influence the facts we choose to observe and the way in which we perceive them. Stephen Jay Gould. There's 4 factors that he lists there that influence our perception and the choosing of the facts that we choose to observe and the way that we perceive them is theory, habit, prejudice, and culture. We've gone over culture, and we will be going over the other 3 factors soon. But stay tuned. In this series, we're going to be looking at worldview. We're going to be looking at philosophy. We're going to be looking at what's the difference between them and how do they relate. But in this section, what we're looking at is the importance of worldview in assuming a worldview that's true. And Richard Dawkins challenges me with the fact that the Darwinian worldview he believes to be the true one. And to do science, we have to assume a worldview or a theory to be able to look at the facts or look at the data and interpret it according to that worldview or that facts. So anyway, thank you for joining me. Stay tuned for session number 2 coming up, or number 4. We're on number 3. Sorry about that. This is Worldview and Philosophy, number 1.